Good morning and welcome to January 25th, 2016's aEEG Live Q&A call. This is Kathy Randall and I'm so excited that you're here with us. And I am just going to go through a quick little bit of slides on documentation. This is a question that I still get rather frequently. I think that because there are no standards of documentation specifically for aEEG, does it go in the chart? Does it not go in the chart? Does it go in the medical record? Do you have to take an image? I think that there's still just a lot of ambiguity around what we should be doing. So what I've given you today is just some of basically my opinion of the things that I think if you're doing aEEG in your NICU that you should be considering. So in lesson 2 of the aEEG online course, we talk about dividing up all the different roles when it comes to aEEG, and there are so many. I mean, I think it did take the entire hour to go through all the different roles and things that we did. So this is going to just be a little sneak peek at that and talking about specifically documentation. So who will document, what will they document, and where will they document? So who? So this is a big question, and this is why when you're taking on aEEG in your unit, it's important to have these conversations. Up front would be best, but especially along the way as you're using aEEG. So will there be real-time documentation by nursing staff? Will they mark on the device? Will they only notate in the EMR? Or will they have some sort of paper flow sheet? If nursing is documenting, what will they document? So is it going to be impedance? Is it going to be actual pattern recognition? Or will it be just the margins, the upper and the lower margins? And that's actually what I'm kind of in favor of, as well as just an assessment of the impedance and potential artifacts, and beginning as you get, in the beginning keeping it simple and then advancing as time goes on. Where will they document? I'm going to give some examples of things that I think should be documented in real time on the actual device. And this gives the interpretation so much more richness, and also does definitely aid in interpretation, especially when you're trying to decide between artifacts and non-artifacts. So that would be nursing. What about physicians? What about neurology? So similar questions. Who will document? What will they document? And where? Some places where I've done consulting work, they create a dot phrase or they create a template for what goes in the progress note. I think with anything that you order and any device that's in use on the patient, it's our responsibility to always assess that. Number one, thinking about whether or not it's adding value to the patient's care. And then number two, whether or not it should continue from day in and day out. So it's been on 36 hours. Should it stay on another 24? Should it stay on just 12 more? And just daily thinking about the plan and whether or not it's adding value to the patient's care. Again, for physicians, for neurology, for neonatology, where will you document? Will it be in the electronic record? Will it be a note? Will it be a special procedure note? Will it be billable? And that's a whole different conversation. But definitely if you don't write a note, it's never billable. So definitely these are things to consider. So let's talk a little bit about event marking. And this is what something you would do on the device in real time. And so almost every device that I've ever seen has some sort of event marking capability. And you can either customize those lists that appear. So even on conventional EEG devices that you may have full video EEG running and you have an aEEG trend on the side, all those devices have the ability to display events in real time. And actually it's preferable over a written log, which sometimes you still see places that have a written log. But really this is an essential thing to begin to do. I think customizing that quick pick list makes things much easier for staff. Some devices have that, and some just have kind of some stock ones, but kind of moving forward, I imagine that all devices will have some sort of customization available. And then again, if people are actually, the nurses at the bedside, are actually taking the time to do these event markings, and then it's important that we utilize these event markings when we're actually interpreting the traces themselves. And so I'll show a couple examples of where that's been helpful in my experience. So what are some of these key events? So if you don't have customization, or if you're thinking about what kind of customization to create, these are some of the things that I think are really essential. Number one, medications. So whether or not you define antiepileptics or sedation or the administration of surfactant, it doesn't matter, but it does help to add light in real time to those things when you're going back through. So you don't have to go to the MAR and look and see, oh, that was sedation that was given. Oh, that's when the phenobarb was given. If they can just notate it, phenobarb or Dilantin, Ativan, on the actual tracing, that's so much more helpful. But just having an umbrella of medications, if you're limited in fields, this would be great too. Of course, anytime someone observes seizures or suspicious-like behaviors, it would be great for those to also be noted so that you can try to correlate actual electrographic changes with these observed movements. So anytime, we see that, that's really, really helpful. And I've had many times where nurses have noted that they've seen seizure-like activities, and then we find actually correlated, EEG seizures as well. So here's an example, it's a pretty dramatic one, of an infant who was given morphine and midazolam, right there where the arrow is kind of in the middle. And you can see this abrupt drop in background voltage from a, not an awesome tracing, but, a little asymmetrical tracing here. So this patient received morphine and midazolam. It's actually not noted here. It was noted in the MAR, and so we had to go back and looking for it, and there we go. We found what was the cause of this suppression. And this is not an isolated incident. If you are monitoring infants during administration you actually of sedation, you will actually see it quite frequently happen like this. All right, so what are some of the other events to mark? Hands-on care are really, really helpful, as well as if you're doing repositioning, changing sensors, manipulating the sensors, or troubleshooting them in any way. Those are all really helpful things because they cause so much movement artifacts, and oftentimes does cause a shift in the baseline. So you're seeing this kind of abrupt change in the background pattern, and it's helpful if they just note, start of cares, end of cares. Some devices even have the ability to have what they call duration events, and you can turn the event on and it stays kind of highlighting the background until the event is complete, and then you mark it complete. So that's a little kind of a fun tool that some devices have, that kind of duration event. So changes in ventilation strategies or changes in vital signs. Obviously, we know that, apnea, spikes in blood pressure, things like that could be a sign of seizures, especially a subclinical seizure. So those are helpful to note, but also changes in ventilation. So if we're changing from conventional to high frequency causes so much artifact to the aEEG that it's nice to be able to kind of distinguish when that began. I also do see that when people do position changes when babies are on high frequency, it's not uncommon to see the artifact, that jiggle artifact, kind of shifting from one side to the other as the infants reposition from left to right, or maybe more midline and supine, and to see that as well. So just, it's helpful, especially if you're changing and taking off or adding different ventilatory strategies. It sometimes does create artifacts, which then it might be helpful to have that noted. Procedures. So intubation, surgery, anything like that, those are great things to mark on the device. And so I keep saying on the device because this is going to actually give a mark right onto the tracing itself. And this then allows you to be able to review the tracing with, especially if you don't have video, with much more detail. And again, it just adds to the story and gives you richness to that tracing. The unfortunate part of all these devices to date is that they do not in any way sync or integrate into our electronic medical record. And so anything that the nurse puts on the device has to be replicated in the, especially if it's relevant, in the electronic record. So everything we ask them to document on the device is duplication. So I like to be pretty selective about what things they do put on the device. This is just an example where someone documented that they were actually patting the infant. And I think this is a great example. All these little green lines you see kind of across the aEEG here, those are all notations or markings. And this one said patting. And if you look at the tracing, look how rhythmic it is. Patting an infant to console them or to settle them in to go to sleep, or burping them, all of those are, I know you probably don't really even think about it, but we do it in a very rhythmic way. And this can really fake you out on thinking it's a seizure. So this is pretty high frequency, but at the same time, you know, we have all seen seizures that have high frequency too. So anyways, this is just a great example where the note that the nurse took the time to put in there really made a difference. Otherwise, we maybe would have been suspicious enough to go ahead and even order a full EEG if we had had other concerns about the baby. All right, so if we are gonna do some event marking on the tracing to help with interpretation and to rule out artifacts, well, then the other piece is really kind of documenting in the EMR from a nursing point of view some of the moment-to-moment interpretation of the aEEG. And so these are just some screenshots from, I believe that these are from American Family in Wisconsin. And these are just some screenshots of things that, you know, we're using. So here you can see that there is, you know, basically the toggle on aEEG monitoring on, yes or no. And then what is the type of monitor that they're using. And then they go into assessing the impedance of values. So how well is the electrodes connected? And then they have the nursing staff look at the left and the right upper and lower margins, as well as the cross-cerebral upper and lower margins, and then document where the tracing is falling. So much like documenting vital signs, you're just documenting the values you observe. And you can decide to do this however frequently you want, every hour, every couple hours. You know, only do the maximums or only do the minimums. You know, you can kind of make a decision in your unit, whatever suits you guys. I think looking at it at least hourly definitely helps you to see the trends. I feel like if you wait 2 and 3 hours between really observing the trend, kind of too long to really be able to catch something that's changing. It's also great if you can begin to train the staff to observe for the presence or the absence of sleep-wake cycling. And it doesn't have to be that you get so specific between mature and immature and absent. Let me just say present and absent, or, you know, like evolving or something. But I think that mature, if you define mature as about 1 per hour while the infant is sleeping, and immature would be less than that or just not as robust. And then, of course, absent is absent. But I think definitely, you know, using some of these things, the nurses can begin at the bedside to really appreciate the moment-to-moment changes of aEEG. So those are, of course, just a really quick overview of things to document in the notes, on the computer, in the electronic medical records, as well as on the device itself. And I think that documentation, event marking, beginning to have people look at the trends, including it in your daily notes, and just thinking about how is it contributing to the patient's care, again, justifying it for its use. I think those are all just good practices that we should all be doing. So as always, if you have got questions, please email me. I'd be happy to address any questions on our live Q&A calls in the future. And for now, I guess I will just sign off and wish you all a very happy New Year.